Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The rain pounded down like 1,000 fists, hammering the rusted roof of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Detroit. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of blood, gunpowder, and desperation. James Carver, once a millionaire who owned half the city's skyline, now crouched behind a stack of rotting crates, his $5,000 Armani suit torn to shreds, blood seeping from a bullet wound in his shoulder. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a fight against the pain tearing through his body. In his trembling right hand, he gripped a Glock, the cold metal slick with sweat and rain. Across the room, Sasha Brooks, 25, fierce and dripping wet, stood over a hulking figure sprawled on the concrete floor. Her chest heaved as she clutched a jagged shard of glass, its edge stained red from where she'd just driven it into the man's leg. Victor, the bastard who'd dragged her into this hellhole, groaned and cursed, his meaty hand clawing at the wound. "Keep running, Sasha! Don't look back!" James shouted, his voice hoarse, barely cutting through the roar of the storm outside. Sasha spun toward him, her wild curls plastered to her face, rainwater streaming down her cheeks like tears she'd never shed. The silver mesh outfit she'd worn for her last underground fashion gig was ripped at the side, exposing the curve of her hip and the tattoo of thorns snaking along her collarbone. Her dark eyes blazed with a mix of fear and fury. "You're bleeding bad, man! We're screwed if you pass out!" she yelled, stepping over Victor's writhing body. The warehouse trembled as thunder cracked overhead, and a stray bullet from earlier sparked against a metal beam, igniting a pile of oily rags in the corner. Flames licked up the wall, casting flickering shadows over the chaos. Victor, his face twisted in rage, lunged for Sasha's ankle with a snarl. "You're dead, both of you!" he roared, but she stomped down hard on his hand, the crunch of bone drowned out by his scream. James staggered to his feet, the world tilting as blood loss clawed at his vision. He stumbled toward Sasha, grabbing her arm. "We gotta go, now!" Together, they bolted for the gaping hole where a door used to be, the fire chasing them like a living thing. Rain lashed their faces as they burst into the night, the muddy ground sucking at their shoes. Behind them, the warehouse glowed orange, a beacon of the hell they'd just escaped. They didn't stop running until the sound of Victor's curses faded into the storm, leaving only the pounding of their hearts and the promise of a tomorrow they might not live to see. That was a month ago. Rewind the clock, and it all started in a place you'd never expect a millionaire's heart to get stolen. A beat-up McDonald's on the east side of Detroit, where the fries were greasy, the lights flickered, and the rain never seemed to stop. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of night where the sky opened up and dumped its guts on anyone dumb enough to be outside. James Carver wasn't supposed to be here. At 38, he was the guy who owned penthouses with views of the Detroit River, not the type to slum it in a fast food joint with cracked tiles and a busted neon sign that buzzed like a dying fly. But his Rolls-Royce Phantom, $450,000 worth of sleek black luxury, had coughed its last breath a mile down the road, leaving him stranded in the downpour. He'd trudged through the mud, his Italian leather shoes ruined, his tailored vest soaked through, and pushed open the grimy glass door of the McDonald's just to get out of the rain. Inside, the place smelled like fryer oil and wet dog. A couple of teenagers huddled in a booth, sharing a small fry and laughing over some TikTok video. An old guy in a faded Lions jacket nursed a soda by the window, staring out at the storm like it owed him money. Behind the counter, Sasha Brooks was the only thing moving, wiping down the register with a rag that had seen better days. She was 25, with skin like polished mahogany and a mess of curls spilling out from under her McDonald's visor. Her uniform was standard issue, black polo, khaki pants, but it hugged her curves in a way that made you look twice. One sleeve was torn at the shoulder, probably from hauling trash bags in the rain, and it showed off a tattoo of thorny vines curling down her chest. She glanced up as James walked in, her eyes sharp and unimpressed. "Welcome to McDonald's. What you want?" she called out, her voice carrying that Detroit edge, tough, quick, no bullshit. James shook the rain off his sleeves, feeling out of place under the fluorescent lights. "Small fries," he muttered, barely looking at her. He just needed something to do while he waited for his driver to figure out the car situation. He reached for his wallet, patting his pockets, and froze. Nothing. Not a damn thing. The wallet, custom leather, stuffed with platinum cards and cash, was gone. Probably dropped in the mud somewhere between here and the car. "Shit," he hissed under his breath. Sasha raised an eyebrow, leaning on the counter. "What's the problem, big shot? You look like you just lost $1 million. "I forgot my wallet," he said, his tone clipped, irritation bubbling up. He wasn't used to this, being caught off guard, looking like a fool in front of some minimum wage kid. She smirked, sizing him up like he was a stray dog that wandered in. "Gimme a sec." She dug into her own pocket, pulled out a crumpled $5 bill, and rang up the order herself. The register beeped, and she slid the receipt across the counter. "Don't sweat it, man. I got you. Fries will be up in a minute." James stared at her, his jaw tightening. "I don't need your charity," he snapped, the words coming out harsher than he meant. He wasn't some broke asshole who couldn't pay his way. He was James fucking Carver, the guy who'd turned crumbling warehouses into luxury lofts. Sasha didn't flinch. She crossed her arms, the torn sleeve shifting to show more of that tattoo, and gave him a look that could cut glass. "Too bad, 'cause you're stuck with it. You gonna take the fries or what?" He opened his mouth to argue, but the fryer dinged behind her, and she turned away, grabbing a red carton and scooping in a handful of golden fries. The smell hit him, salty, warm, a little greasy, and his stomach growled despite himself. He hadn't eaten since lunch, too busy dodging calls from his board of directors about the tax evasion mess threatening to tank his company. She set the fries in front of him, her fingers brushing the edge of the counter, chipped red nail polish catching the light. "Go on, eat," she said, nodding at the carton. "You look like you need it more than me." He hesitated, then grabbed the fries and slid into a booth near the door. The first bite was hot, crispy, and stupidly good for something that cost less than $1. He watched her from the corner of his eye as she went back to wiping down the counter, humming some tune he didn't recognize. Her hips swayed just enough to make him notice, and he cursed himself for it. She was a nobody, just a girl flipping burgers in a shithole McDonald's. So why the hell couldn't he stop looking? Outside, the rain kept pounding, turning the parking lot into a swamp. A pickup truck rumbled by, its headlights slicing through the dark, and James caught a glimpse of his reflection in the window. Disheveled, soaked, a far cry from the polished kingpin he'd been that morning. His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably his driver finally texting back, but he ignored it. For some reason, he didn't want to leave yet. Sasha glanced over, catching him staring. "What? You waiting for me to bring you ketchup or something?" She teased, tossing the rag over her shoulder. He smirked despite himself. "Maybe I'm just trying to figure you out." "Good luck with that," she shot back, leaning forward on the counter so her uniform stretched tight across her chest. "I'm a damn mystery, even to myself." He chuckled, a low sound that surprised him. It had been weeks since he'd laughed, maybe months. Between the company imploding, his family pushing him to marry some heiress he couldn't stand, and the whiskey he'd been drowning in, there hadn't been much room for anything real. But here, in this dump of a McDonald's, With this girl who didn't give a shit who he was, something clicked. He didn't know what it was yet, but it was enough to keep him there, munching on fries he didn't pay for, watching her move like she owned the place. The door swung open, letting in a gust of wet wind, and a guy in a hoodie shuffled in, shaking off the rain. Sasha straightened up, her easy vibe shifting to something sharper. "Yo, Malik, you're late," she called out, and the guy grinned, flashing a gold tooth. "Blame the storm, girl," he said, sliding behind the counter like he worked there too. He gave James a quick once-over, his eyes narrowing. "Who's this dude?" "Nobody," Sasha said, but her lips twitched like she was hiding a smile. "Just some rich boy who can't pay his tab." Malik laughed, loud and rough. "Better watch him, Sasha. He looks like trouble." James met Malik's stare, his jaw tightening again. Trouble? Yeah, maybe he was. But he had a feeling Sasha was the real storm brewing here, one he wasn't ready for, but couldn't walk away from either. Hey, y'all! Did that opening hook you? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. What do you think Sasha's hiding under that tough girl vibe? Let's dive deeper together. The rain hadn't let up by the next Friday night, but James Carver didn't care. He was back at that same McDonald's on Detroit's east side, the one with the flickering lights and the fries that tasted better than they had any right to. His Rolls-Royce was still in the shop, some busted fuel line the mechanic swore would cost a fortune to fix, but that wasn't why he was here. He'd spent the last 3 days trying to shake the image of Sasha Brooks from his head. That torn uniform, that tattoo snaking down her chest, the way she'd smirked at him like he was some chump off the street. He didn't owe her anything, not really, but the $5 she'd shelled out for his fries gnawed at him. James Carver didn't do debts, not to anyone, especially not some fast food girl with attitude. He pushed through the door, the bell jingling weakly over the hum of the storm outside. The place was busier tonight, half a dozen folks scattered across the booths, scarfing down Big Macs and nuggets. The air smelled like grease and wet coats, and the floor was slick with tracked-in mud. Sasha was behind the counter again, flipping between the fryer and the register like she'd been born to hustle. Her curls were stuffed under that dumb visor, but a few strands had escaped, sticking to her neck where sweat glistened under the fluorescence. She didn't notice him at first, too busy barking at Malik to grab more buns from the back. James stepped up to the counter, pulling a crisp envelope from his coat pocket. $50 in cash. Way more than the fries were worth, but he wasn't here to nickel and dime her. He cleared his throat, and she glanced up, those dark eyes locking on him like a hawk spotting prey. "Well, damn," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Look who's back. You lost again, rich boy?" "I don't get lost," he shot back, sliding the envelope across the counter. "This is for the other night. I pay my debts." Sasha stared at the envelope like it was a live snake, then snorted. "What's this? You think I'm running a soup kitchen?" She snatched it up, ripped it open, and pulled out the bills. Her smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl that could have peeled paint. $50? For some fries? You for real?" "It's not charity," James said, his voice tight. "It's what I owe you." She laughed, sharp and bitter, and shoved the money back at him. "I don't need your pity cash, man. Take it and shove it." The bills fluttered to the counter, one landing in a puddle of spilled soda. She turned away, grabbing a tray of fries like the conversation was over. James clenched his fists, heat creeping up his neck. He wasn't used to this, people throwing his money back in his face. "You're stubborn as hell, you know that?" She spun around, leaning on the counter so close he could smell the faint vanilla of her lotion over the fryer grease. "And you're a damn fool if you think I'm for sale. What's your deal, huh? You slumming it down here to feel good about yourself?" He opened his mouth to snap back, but the words died when he caught the fire in her eyes. Not just anger, but something deeper, something that dared him to push harder. Before he could figure it out, the rain picked up outside, hammering the windows like it wanted in. Sasha cursed under her breath and grabbed a mop from the corner. "Storm's gonna flood this dump again," she muttered, heading for the door. "Stay here if you want, but I ain't babysitting you." James didn't stay. He followed her out, the cold rain slapping his face as he stepped under the sagging awning where she was already shoving the mop at a puddle creeping in from the parking lot. Her uniform was getting soaked, clinging to her like a second skin, and he had to look away for a second to keep his head straight. "You don't have to do that," he said, raising his voice over the downpour. "Yeah, I do," she shot back, not looking up. "Lila'll have my ass if this place turns into a swamp." She pushed the mop harder, water splashing around her sneakers. "What's your excuse for standing out here?" He didn't have one, not a good one anyway. "Maybe I just like the company." She stopped, straightening up and resting the mop handle against her hip. Rain dripped from her visor, running down her cheeks, and she wiped it away with the back of her hand. "You're full of shit, you know that?" But there was a flicker of a smile, quick and gone, like she didn't hate him as much as she wanted to. He smirked, stepping closer. "I've been told worse." They stood there, the rain drumming around them, the air heavy with something neither of them could name. Then she broke it, tossing the mop against the wall. "Come on," she said, nodding toward the alley beside the McDonald's. "I need a smoke before I lose my damn mind." He followed her again. Why the hell not? Into the narrow strip between the building and a chain-link fence. The rain was lighter here, blocked by the overhang, but it still dripped through the cracks, plinking onto the cracked pavement. Sasha pulled a crumpled pack of Newports from her pocket, lit one up, and took a long drag. The smoke curled up, mixing with the wet air, and she offered him the pack. "Nah, I'm good," he said, leaning against the wall. His coat was soaked through now, but he didn't care. "Suit yourself." She blew out a cloud of smoke, eyeing him. "So what's your story, huh? You don't look like the type to hang out in places like this." He shrugged, the weight of the last few weeks pressing down on him. Board meetings, threats from his family, the bottle of Jack Daniels he'd polished off last night. "Maybe I'm tired of the places I'm supposed to be." She laughed again, softer this time. "Deep, man. Real deep." She took another drag, then flicked the cigarette away, the embers sizzling out in a puddle. "You want to see something real, though? Stick around tomorrow night. I got a gig that ain't flipping burgers." "A gig?" He raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "Yeah," she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping low. "But you gotta keep up. Think you can handle that, rich boy?" He didn't get a chance to answer. Malik poked his head out from the back door, yelling, "Sasha, get your ass in here! Fryer's acting up again!" She rolled her eyes, brushing past James close enough that he felt the heat off her. "Tomorrow night," she called over her shoulder. "Don't punk out." The next night, James was back, not at McDonald's, but at a spot he never would have stepped foot in a month ago, a grimy warehouse-turned-club in Corktown, a few miles from the Golden Arches. The address Sasha had scribbled on a napkin burned a hole in his pocket as he pushed through a crowd of tattooed kids and leather jacket punks. The air was thick with sweat, cheap beer, and the bass thumping from speakers rigged to the rafters. He felt out of place in his tailored coat, but he didn't care. He was here for her. The lights dimmed, and a cheer went up as Sasha strutted onto a makeshift runway cutting through the crowd. James froze, his breath catching in his throat. She wasn't the McDonald's girl now. She was something else, something wild. Her outfit was a silver mesh bodysuit, hugging every curve like it was painted on, shimmering under the strobing lights. Her hair was loose, a halo of curls bouncing with every step, and those thorny vines tattooed across her chest stood out sharp against her skin. She moved like she owned the room, hips swaying, eyes locked ahead, fierce and untouchable. The crowd hollered, some dude whistling loud enough to pierce the noise, but she didn't flinch, just kept walking, a queen in a world of chaos. James couldn't take his eyes off her. His heart slammed against his ribs, a mix of awe and something hotter, something he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a gig. This was Sasha, unfiltered, raw, and real. He edged closer to the runway, elbowing past a guy with a mohawk, until he was near enough to see the sweat beading on her neck, the way her lips parted slightly as she hit her mark and struck a pose. She saw him then, her gaze cutting through the haze to land on him. For a split second, her mask slipped, a flash of surprise, maybe amusement, before she smirked and turned away, disappearing behind a curtain as the crowd roared. James stood there, rooted, the noise fading to a dull hum in his ears. He'd come to pay a debt, but now he was in deeper than he'd ever planned. The vibe shifted fast. A shadow loomed near the stage. A big guy in a leather jacket, his face hard and mean. He grabbed Sasha's arm as she stepped off, yanking her close. James tensed, his fists clenching. The guy's voice cut through the din, low and ugly. "You're mine, girl. Don't forget that." Sasha jerked free, her jaw tight. "Back off, Victor. I ain't your damn property." Victor laughed, a sound like gravel crunching, and stepped closer. "We'll see about that." James didn't think. He moved, pushing through the crowd, ready to step in. But Sasha shot him a look, sharp, warning, and shook her head. "Not here. Not now." He stopped, chest heaving, but the fire in his gut didn't die. Who the hell was this guy? And why did Sasha look like she was one wrong move from snapping? The McDonald's on Detroit's east side was quieter than usual the next Tuesday night, but the air inside felt heavy, like the storm brewing outside had seeped through the cracked walls. James Carver sat in his usual booth by the window, nursing a small fry he'd actually paid for this time. His coat was slung over the seat, still damp from the drizzle he'd walked through to get here. He hadn't seen Sasha since that wild night at the underground fashion show 3 days ago, but her face, those fierce eyes, that silver mesh clinging to her like a second skin, hadn't left his head. Neither had that creep, Victor, and the way he'd grabbed her. James didn't know what her deal was with that guy, but it didn't sit right, gnawing at him like a splinter he couldn't pull out. The door swung open, letting in a gust of wet wind, and Sasha strode in, late for her shift. Her visor was crooked, her curls a mess, and her uniform looked like she'd thrown it on in a rush. Untucked, a ketchup stain smudged on the hem. She didn't glance at James, just headed straight for the counter where Malik was flipping burgers, his gold tooth flashing as he grinned at her. "Girl, you look like you just rolled out of bed," Malik teased, tossing a spatula between his hands like a juggler. "Shut up, man," Sasha shot back, tying her apron with quick, jerky moves. Had to deal with some bullshit on the way over. Her voice was tight, clipped, not the usual sass James had gotten used to. Something was off. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, watching her. The fryer hissed as she dumped a basket of nuggets in, the oil popping like tiny firecrackers. A couple of regulars shuffled in, a mom with a sleepy kid, an old dude in a trucker hat, but the vibe stayed tense. Malik nudged Sasha, lowering his voice. "You good? You've been jumpy since that show." "I'm fine," she snapped, loud enough that James caught it. She grabbed a tray and started slamming cups onto it, ice rattling like she was trying to drown out whatever was eating at her. He couldn't sit still anymore. He slid out of the booth, fries forgotten, and walked up to the counter, leaning against it casual-like, but close enough to feel the heat off the fryer. "Hey," he said, keeping his tone light. "You all right?" Sasha froze for a second, her hand hovering over a stack of napkins, then shot him a look that could have melted steel. "What's it to you, rich boy? You my therapist now?" "Just asking," he said, holding up his hands. "You look like you're about to punch something." She snorted, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe I am. Stick around, you might catch the show." She turned away, shoving the tray toward Malik, who raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Before James could push it, the door banged open again, hard this time, glass rattling in the frame. 3 guys stormed in, and the room went dead quiet. The leader was Victor, all 6 foot something of him, leather jacket stretched tight over his broad shoulders, a scar cutting through his left eyebrow like a warning sign. His boots thudded on the tile, leaving muddy streaks, and the 2 goons behind him, skinny one with a buzz cut, big one with a neck tattoo, flanked him like dogs on a leash. The mom in the corner scooped up her kid and bolted for the bathroom, while the trucker hat guy shrank into his seat. Victor zeroed in on Sasha, his grin all teeth and no warmth. "There's my girl," he drawled, voice dripping with slime. "Thought you'd be hiding after that little stunt Saturday night." Sasha's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. She stepped out from behind the counter, hands on her hips. "I ain't your girl, Vic. What you want?" He laughed, low and ugly, and closed the gap between them, towering over her. "You know what I want, Sasha. That debt your mama left. It's past due, sweetheart. Time to pay up, one way or another." James felt his blood heat up, his fists clenching at his sides. He didn't know the whole story, but he didn't need to. This guy was bad news, and Sasha was in his crosshairs. He stepped forward, voice steady. She said, "Back off. You deaf or just stupid?" Victor's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "Who the hell's this clown?" He looked James up and down, taking in the coat, the posture, the vibe that screamed money even when he was trying to blend in. "Oh, I get it. You think this white boy's gonna save you, huh?" He grabbed Sasha's arm, yanking her close enough that she stumbled. That was it. James didn't think. He swung, his fist connecting with Victor's jaw in a solid crack. The big man staggered back, more surprised than hurt, and the room exploded. Victor's goons lunged, the skinny one tackling James into a table that flipped with a crash, sending ketchup packets and salt shakers flying. The big one went for Sasha, but she snatched a metal tray off the counter and swung it hard, smashing it into his face. He howled, clutching his nose as blood gushed between his fingers. "Back off, Vic, or I'll shove this tray where the sun don't shine," Sasha yelled, her voice raw, holding the tray like a shield. She swung again, catching the skinny guy in the shoulder as he tried to pin James down. James wrestled free, adrenaline pumping, and landed a sloppy punch on the skinny guy's gut, sending him wheezing to the floor. But Victor was back on his feet, roaring, and he charged Sasha, slamming her against the counter. Her arm hit the edge, and a sharp hiss escaped her lips as a cut opened up, blood streaking down her wrist. James saw red, literally and figuratively, and tackled Victor, both of them crashing into the soda machine. Ice and Sprite sprayed everywhere, soaking the floor, turning it into a slick mess. Malik burst out from the back, a butcher knife in hand. Where the hell did he get that? And shouted, "Get the fuck out of here, all y'all!" He waved the blade, wild-eyed, and the goons hesitated, dragging their bloody noses toward the door. Victor shoved James off, spitting blood onto the tiles. "This ain't over," he snarled, pointing at Sasha. "You're mine, girl. And you," he glared at James, "you're dead meat." He stormed out, his crew limping behind, leaving the McDonald's a wreck. Sasha slid down against the counter, clutching her bleeding arm, her chest heaving. James dropped to his knees beside her, panting, his knuckles bruised and his shirt torn. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. She nodded, but her eyes were glassy, pain and fury mixing together. "Yeah, I'm peachy," she muttered, wincing as she pressed her apron against the cut. Blood soaked through the fabric, a dark red bloom against the black. Malik tossed the knife onto the counter and crouched down, his face hard. "What the hell, Sasha? You didn't tell me Vic was back on your ass like this." "Didn't think he'd pull this shit here," she said, her voice shaking just enough to betray her. She looked at James, something soft flickering in her eyes before she buried it. "Why'd you do that, huh? You didn't have to." "Didn't feel like watching him break you," James said, simple as that. He didn't know where the words came from, but they were true. She stared at him, then looked away, wiping her face with her good hand. The door creaked open again, and Lila, the manager, a wiry woman with gray streaks in her hair and a smoker's rasp, stormed in from the office, her eyes wide at the chaos. "What in God's name happened here? Y'all trying to get me shut down?" Sasha pushed herself up, wincing. "Some asshole started trouble, Lila. It's handled." "Handled?" Lila barked, gesturing at the overturned tables, the blood, the soda pooling on the floor. "This ain't handled, girl. You're fired. Both of you." She pointed at Sasha and Malik, her face red. "And you," she jabbed a finger at James, "get out of my store before I call the cops." James stood, helping Sasha to her feet. Her arm was still bleeding, and she leaned on him more than she probably wanted to. "Come on," he said low. "Let's get that cleaned up." She didn't argue, which told him more than any words could. They stumbled out into the rain, Malik trailing behind, muttering curses under his breath. The storm swallowed the sound of Lila yelling after them, and James's phone buzzed in his pocket, probably his assistant with another crisis about the company imploding. He ignored it. Right now, Sasha's weight against his side, her blood on his hands, was all that mattered. But trouble wasn't done with them. Back at his penthouse that night, James saw the headlines hit his phone. "Millionaire brawls in McDonald's, caught with mystery woman." The paparazzi had gotten wind, and his family was already blowing up his inbox, threatening to cut him off for good. Meanwhile, Sasha sat on his couch, bandaging her arm with a kit he'd dug out, her face pale but set. She didn't know it yet, but losing that job was just the start. She'd come home tomorrow to find an eviction notice on her door, her mom's hospital bills finally catching up. And out there in the dark, Victor was licking his wounds, plotting his next move. The neon sign of the Motor City Motel buzzed like a dying insect, casting a sickly green glow over the parking lot where James Carver's borrowed Chevy Impala sat, its bumper dented from a fender bender he didn't have the cash to fix. It was Wednesday night, a day after the McDonald's brawl that had turned his life upside down, and the rain had finally eased into a drizzle, leaving the air thick and muggy. Inside room 12, the walls were stained yellow from years of cigarette smoke, the carpet threadbare, and the single bed sagged in the middle like it had given up on life. James leaned against the chipped dresser, arms crossed, watching Sasha Brooks pace the tiny space like a caged panther. Her arm was wrapped in a makeshift bandage, gauze from a gas station first aid kit, stained red at the edges, and her McDonald's uniform was swapped for a tank top and ripped jeans she'd grabbed from her place before the landlord locked her out. She stopped, hands on her hips, and glared at him. "You're a damn mess, James. Why you even here?" Her voice was rough, frayed from a day of losing everything. Her job, her apartment, her grip on the life she'd been clawing to hold together. He didn't flinch, just met her stare with those gray eyes that had seen too much lately. "Because you're the only real thing I've got left," he said, the words slipping out raw and unpolished. He didn't know where they came from. Maybe the whiskey he hadn't touched since last night. Maybe the bruise on his jaw from Victor's goon. But they hung there, heavy in the stale air. Sasha blinked, caught off guard, then laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't match the fire in her eyes. "Real?" Man, you don't even know me. She turned away, running a hand through her curls, the tank top riding up just enough to show the curve of her lower back, slick with sweat from the humid night. I know enough, he said, stepping closer, his boots scuffing the carpet. I know you're tough as hell, and I know you didn't have to save my ass back there. But you did. She spun around, closing the gap between them until he could feel the heat rolling off her. And you didn't have to jump in either. But here we are, broke, beat up, and hiding out in this shithole. Her breath hitched, her chest rising fast, and her eyes searched his face like she was looking for a lie. He didn't give her one. Yeah, here we are. His voice dropped, softer now, and he reached out, brushing his fingers against her good arm. Her skin was warm, smooth, and she didn't pull away. Not yet. The room felt smaller, the hum of the motel's AC unit fading into a dull drone. Outside, a car horn blared, tires squealing on wet asphalt, but it might as well have been a world away. Sasha's lips parted, just a fraction, and she tilted her head, daring him. Then kiss me before I change my mind, she whispered. The words a challenge wrapped in a plea. James didn't hesitate. He closed the distance, his hand sliding to her waist as his mouth found hers. The kiss was rough, hungry, tasting of salt and rain and the chaos they'd waded through. Her fingers dug into his shirt, pulling him closer, and he pressed her back against the wall, the plaster cool against his knuckles. Her tank top bunched up under his grip, and he felt the curve of her hip, the way her body arched into his, like she'd been holding this in as long as he had. Rainwater still clung to her hair, dripping onto his cheek, and her breath came hot and fast against his lips. She broke it first, pulling back just enough to catch her breath, her forehead resting against his. You're trouble. You know that? She murmured, her voice shaky but alive. Pot calling the kettle black, he shot back, a grin tugging at his mouth. He brushed a curl from her face, his thumb lingering on her cheek, and she didn't push him away. They stood there, tangled up in each other, the world outside the motel room a distant hum. But the quiet didn't last. Sasha stepped back, wiping her lips with the back of her hand, and sank onto the bed, the springs creaking under her weight. We can't stay here long, she said, her tone shifting to something harder. Victor's not done, and I'm out of moves. James sat beside her, the mattress dipping, and ran a hand through his damp hair. What's the deal with that asshole? He's been on you like a damn shadow. She stared at the floor, her fingers picking at a loose thread on her jeans. My mom. She got sick a couple years back. Cancer. Hospital bills piled up and I couldn't keep up. Took a loan from Victor to cover it. Thought I'd pay it off with the fashion gigs. She swallowed, her voice cracking. She died last month, and now he's saying the debt's mine, plus interest. Wants me to work it off, if you catch my drift. James's stomach twisted, a slow burn of anger flaring up. Work it off how? Sasha's laugh was hollow. How you think? He runs girls, James. High-end shit. Clubs, private parties. I told him to shove it, but he don't take no for an answer. He clenched his jaw, the pieces clicking into place. Victor's grip on her at the show, the threats at McDonald's. That's why he keeps coming after you. Yeah, she said, looking up at him, her eyes dark and tired. And now you're in it too, 'cause you couldn't keep your fist to yourself. He didn't apologize. I'd do it again. She shook her head, but there was a ghost of a smile, fleeting and gone. You're crazy, man. You got your own mess. Why you dragging yourself into mine? He leaned back, staring at the water-stained ceiling. My mess ain't much better. Company's tanking. tax evasion shit my dad started before he died. Family's pushing me to marry some rich girl to bail it out, but I'd rather burn it all down than play their game. He paused, the weight of it settling in. And then there's the loan I took, off the books, from some guys who don't mess around. They're after me now, too. Sasha's eyes widened, a flicker of shock breaking through her guard. Wait, what? You're in debt to a crew like Victor's? Worse, he said, his voice flat. These guys don't just break legs, they bury you. Took it to keep the board off my back, but it's catching up. She let out a low whistle, leaning back beside him. Well, damn. We're a pair, huh? Two dumbasses running from the same kind of wolves. He chuckled, the sound rough but real. Guess so. They sat there, shoulder to shoulder, the bed creaking under their weight. The drizzle outside tapped against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the thud of his pulse. For a minute, it felt like they could stay like this. Two broken people hiding out in a nowhere motel, pretending the world couldn't touch them. But reality didn't play nice. Sasha shifted, pulling her knees up, and winced as her bandaged arm brushed the bed. I went by my place today, she said, quiet. Landlord changed the locks. Eviction notice was taped to the door. Said I'm out 'cause of the bills. Everything I had's gone. James turned to her, his gut sinking. Everything? Yeah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom's old sewing machine, my sketches, the clothes I was working on, all locked up in there. I got nothing left but what's on me. He didn't know what to say. Sorry wouldn't cut it, and he wasn't good with soft words anyway. Instead, he put a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle, and she didn't shrug it off. We'll figure it out, he said. Not sure how the hell they would, but meaning it anyway. She nodded, slow, like she wanted to believe him. You're still a mess, though, she said, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Bleeding heart and all. Only 'cause you stole it, he shot back, and she laughed. A real one this time, short and bright, cutting through the gloom. But the moment shattered fast. His phone buzzed on the dresser, a string of texts lighting up the screen. He grabbed it, scanning the messages. His sister, pissed as hell. Board's done with you. You're cut off. Fix this or you're out of the family. Another from an unknown number. You got 48 hours to pay up, Carver, or we find you. He tossed the phone down, cursing under his breath. Sasha caught the look on his face. What now? Same shit you're dealing with, he said, standing up, pacing the room. They're coming for me too. We're both on borrowed time. She stood, stepping into his path, her tank top clinging to her from the humidity, her eyes fierce again. Then we run, together. 'Cause I ain't letting Victor or your damn loan sharks win. He looked at her, this girl who'd lost everything but still burned like a torch in the dark, and something clicked. Together, he agreed, his voice steady. They didn't have a plan, not yet. But the kiss, the confession, the shared weight of their screwed-up lives tied them tighter than any rope. Outside, the drizzle picked up, drumming harder against the window, and James knew the wolves were closing in. Sasha grabbed her jacket, a beat-up denim thing she'd snagged from the motel Lost and Found, and nodded at the door. Let's get out of here, she said, before this place becomes a trap. He followed her into the night, the Impala's engine rumbling to life, and they peeled out, tires splashing through puddles, heading nowhere but away. The road ahead was dark, but her hand brushed his on the gear shift, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he wasn't drowning alone. The warehouse in Corktown smelled like rust and regret. a hulking skeleton of Detroit's industrial past squatting under a sky that wouldn't stop spitting rain. It was Friday night, 2 days since James Carver and Sasha Brooks had bolted from the Motor City Motel, and the underground fashion scene was in full swing inside. Strobe lights sliced through the dark, painting the crowd in flashes of red and blue. Punks with spiked hair, girls in fishnets, guys with too many piercings, all packed tight, screaming over the thumping bass. Sasha was up there on the makeshift runway, owning it like she was born for it, her silver mesh bodysuit catching every beam of light, her curls bouncing wild and free. She moved with a fierceness that made the room shake, her hips swaying, her eyes locked ahead, untouchable even as the world crumbled around her. James stood near the back, half hidden by a rusted pillar, his borrowed leather jacket, swiped from a thrift store on the way, hanging loose over his bruised frame. He hadn't slept much, not with the texts from his loan sharks buzzing like wasps in his pocket. "Time's up, Carver. We're coming." His shoulder ached from the brawl at McDonald's, and his bank account was a ghost town after his family cut him off. But he was here for her. Sasha had said this gig could score her enough cash to buy some breathing room from Victor, maybe even get her sketches back from the landlord. He didn't buy it. Nothing this easy ever worked out, but he'd promised to stick with her, and damn if he wasn't keeping that promise. The crowd roared as Sasha hit her final pose, one hand on her hip, the other raised like she was flipping off the universe. James felt his chest tighten, a mix of pride and something hotter watching her up there, all fire and defiance. She was a damn force, and he couldn't look away, not from the way the mesh hugged her curves, not from the sweat glistening on her neck, not from the tattoo that seemed to pulse under the lights. But the high didn't last. She stepped off the runway, disappearing behind a tattered curtain, and James pushed through the crowd to meet her. He'd barely made it halfway when a hand clamped down on his arm, hard. He spun, fist ready, and came face to face with Malik, Sasha's shadow from McDonald's, his gold tooth glinting in the dim light. "Yo, man, you gotta bounce," Malik said, voice low and urgent. "Vic's here." Saw him sniffing around backstage. James's gut dropped. "Where's Sasha?" "Still back there," Malik said, nodding toward the curtain. "I tried to warn her, but she's stubborn as hell." "You gotta get her out, man. Now." James didn't wait. He shoved past Malik, elbowing through the sweaty bodies, the bass pounding in his skull like a war drum. He hit the backstage area, a maze of crates, cables, and half-dressed models, and spotted Sasha near a busted window, arguing with a skinny guy in a hoodie who was counting cash. She didn't see Victor until it was too late. The big man loomed out of the shadows, his leather jacket creaking, his scar catching the light like a blade. 2 goons flanked him, the skinny one from McDonald's, nose still swollen, and a new guy with a shaved head and a switchblade flicking in his hand. Victor grabbed Sasha's wrist, yanking her so hard she dropped the cash, bills scattering across the filthy floor. "Time's up, princess," Victor snarled, his voice cutting through the noise. "You're coming with me. Gonna work off that debt the fun way." Sasha twisted, trying to break free, her face a mask of fury. "Get your damn hands off me, Vic!" She swung her free arm, nails raking his cheek, but he laughed, blood beading on his skin, and tightened his grip. James charged in, no plan, just rage. "Let her go, you piece of shit!" He slammed into Victor, shoulder first, knocking him back a step. The goons lunged. Skinny grabbed James's jacket, dragging him down, while Switchblade went for Sasha, blade flashing. She ducked, snatching a metal pipe from a pile of junk, and swung it hard, cracking it against Switchblade's knee. He yelped, dropping the knife, and she kicked it away, the clatter lost in the chaos. Victor roared, shoving Sasha into a stack of crates that toppled with a crash, wood splintering. James wrestled free from Skinny, landing a wild punch that sent the guy sprawling, then turned just as Victor pulled a gun. A snub-nosed .38, black and ugly. The barrel swung toward Sasha, and James didn't think. He tackled Victor again, both of them hitting the floor hard. The gun went off, a deafening bang that echoed off the walls, and a bullet punched into a crate, spraying splinters. "James!" Sasha screamed, scrambling to her feet, the pipe still in her hand. She swung it down on Victor's arm, and he howled, the gun skittering across the concrete. James rolled off, gasping, and grabbed it, hands shaking as he pointed it at Victor's chest. "Stay down," he growled, his voice raw, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead where Skinny had clocked him. His shoulder burned, and he felt something wet soaking his sleeve, more blood, seeping from a graze he hadn't noticed. Victor glared up at him, chest heaving but didn't move. The goons froze, Switchblade clutching his knee, Skinny wiping blood from his lip. The crowd outside was still cheering, oblivious, the music drowning out the fight. Sasha stepped beside James, her breath ragged, the pipe dangling in her grip. Her mesh outfit was torn at the side, exposing a strip of skin, and her eyes were wild, locked on Victor. "You're done, princess," Victor spat, his voice thick with hate. "And your boyfriend's toast. You think this changes anything?" "I'd rather die than let you win, you pig," Sasha shot back, her voice trembling but fierce. She raised the pipe again, ready to swing, but James grabbed her arm. "Sasha, don't," he said, low and urgent. "He's not worth it." She hesitated, her chest heaving, then lowered the pipe, stepping back. "Get him out of here," she muttered, turning away, her hands shaking. James kept the gun trained on Victor, nodding at the goons. "You heard her. Move." They hauled Victor up, his glare promising murder, and dragged him toward the back exit, disappearing into the rain-soaked night. But it wasn't over. Malik burst through the curtain, eyes wide. "Y'all gotta go, now! Someone called the cops, and this place is about to blow!" James lowered the gun, his arms screaming in pain, and turned to Sasha. "You good?" She nodded, but her face was pale, blood streaking her arm from a scrape she'd picked up in the scuffle. "Yeah, let's bounce." They grabbed the scattered cash, barely enough to matter, and ran, dodging crates and cables, the crowd thinning as sirens wailed in the distance. They hit the alley behind the warehouse, rain pelting down, and James pulled her toward the Impala. He fumbled the keys, his hands slick with blood and water, and they piled in, the engine roaring to life. "Drive," Sasha said, slamming her door, her voice tight. "Anywhere but here." He peeled out, tires screeching, the warehouse shrinking in the rear view as red and blue lights flashed behind them. They didn't stop, weaving through back streets, the rain blurring the windshield. Sasha leaned against the seat, clutching her arm, her breath fogging the window. James glanced at her, his heart pounding, not just from the fight, but from the sight of her, alive, still fighting. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She didn't answer right away, just stared out at the dark. "Away," she said finally. "Far as we can get." He nodded, gripping the wheel tighter, blood dripping onto his jeans. The gun sat heavy in his lap, a cold reminder of how close they'd come. Victor was down, but not out, and those loan sharks were still out there, sniffing for him. Sasha's cash wouldn't save them, not from this. They were running on fumes, and the tank was damn near empty. Back at the warehouse, the fire from that stray bullet had caught, licking up the walls, smoke billowing into the night. The crowd scattered, sirens closing in, and Victor's curses echoed in the dark. James and Sasha didn't see it. They were miles away by then. But the flames marked the end of something, and the start of something else, something neither of them could outrun forever. The Impala rumbled down a two-lane road somewhere south of Detroit, the rain a steady drumbeat against the roof. the wipers squeaking with every swipe. It was Saturday morning, hours after the warehouse fight, and the sky was a bruised gray, heavy with the promise of more storms. James Carver gripped the wheel with one hand, the other resting on the gear shift, his knuckles bruised and scabbed. Blood had dried on his sleeve, the graze on his shoulder a dull ache he ignored. Beside him, Sasha Brooks slumped against the passenger door, her silver mesh outfit swapped for a hoodie she'd snagged from the back seat, some old thing Malik had left behind. Her arm was still bandaged, the gauze dirty now, and her curls were a tangled mess framing her face. The gun from Victor sat on the dash, a cold, silent passenger neither of them wanted to touch. They hadn't said much since peeling out of Corktown, the adrenaline crash leaving them raw and quiet. The cash from the gig, crumpled 20s and 10s, was stuffed in Sasha's pocket. Maybe $100 total, not enough to fix anything, but enough to keep them moving. James's phone was dead, battery drained from dodging calls he couldn't answer, and Sasha's was back at her locked-up apartment, lost with everything else. They were off the grid, running blind, and the weight of it pressed down like the humidity sticking to their skin. "Where we at?" Sasha mumbled, her voice rough, breaking the silence as she squinted out the window. Cornfields stretched on either side, wet and drooping, the kind of nowhere you only find when you're trying to disappear. "Somewhere past Monroe," James said, glancing at the faded road sign whipping by. "Maybe 20 miles from the Ohio line. You got a plan, or are we just driving till the tank's dry?" She snorted, shifting to sit up straighter. "Plan? Man, I'm making this up as I go. You're the one with the car. Thought you'd have some fancy rich boy escape route." He smirked, a tired twitch of his lips. "Yeah, well, rich boy's broke now. Family cut me off, loan sharks want my head, and this heap's got maybe a quarter tank left. We're screwed 6 ways to Sunday." Sasha laughed, a low, raspy sound that cut through the gloom. "We're broke as hell, huh? You didn't think we'd make it this far, did you?" "With you?" he said, glancing at her, his gray eyes steady. "Hell yeah, I did." She met his look, something soft flickering in her dark eyes before she turned away, hiding it behind a smirk. "Smooth talker. Keep that up. Might get you somewhere." They fell quiet again, the road humming under the tires, the gun on the dash glinting dully in the gray light. James's mind churned. Victor was out there, licking his wounds, and those loan sharks weren't far behind. Sasha's debt, his debt, the blood on their hands, it was a noose tightening with every mile. But sitting there, her hoodie sleeve brushing his arm, he felt a stubborn spark, like maybe they could outrun it all if they just kept going. The Impala coughed, a shudder running through the engine, and James cursed under his breath. "Shit, we're running on fumes." He pulled off onto a gravel shoulder, the car rattling to a stop beside a sagging barn, its red paint peeling like old skin. The gas gauge needle kissed empty, and the silence settled in, thick and heavy. Sasha leaned forward, peering out the windshield. "Guess this is it, huh? End of the line." "Not yet," he said, popping the door and stepping out into the drizzle. The air smelled like wet earth and decay, and his boots sank into the mud as he circled to the trunk. Sasha followed, zipping the hoodie against the chill, her sneakers squelching as she joined him. "What you looking for?" she asked, hands stuffed in her pockets, watching him rummage through the mess. Empty beer cans, a tire iron, a blanket that smelled like mildew. "Anything we can sell," he said, pulling out a battered toolbox. "Or trade. We're not done yet." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical but game. "You think some farmer's gonna trade gas for a rusty wrench?" "Worth a shot," he said, slamming the trunk. "Unless you want to walk to Toledo." She grinned, a flash of that fire he'd fallen for. Lead the way, big shot. They trudged toward the barn, the drizzle soaking through their clothes. The gun tucked into James's waistband now, a cold weight against his spine. The barn door creaked open on rusted hinges, revealing a dim interior stacked with hay bales and old machinery. A beat-up pickup sat in the corner, and James's pulse kicked up. Maybe they had a chance. "Yo, check this out," Sasha said, her voice sharp. She'd wandered to a pile of tarps in the back, kicking one aside to reveal a duffel bag, black and heavy. She unzipped it, and her breath caught. "Holy shit, James. Look at this." He crossed the barn in 3 strides, dropping beside her. Inside the bag was cash, stacks of it, 20s and 50s bundled tight with rubber bands, more money than he'd seen in months. A brick of something wrapped in plastic sat beside it. Drugs, probably coke, he didn't care to guess. His heart slammed against his ribs, a mix of shock and dread washing over him. "Where the hell this come from?" he said, voice low, like someone might hear them out here in the middle of nowhere. Sasha's eyes were wide, glinting with something dangerous. "Victor," she said, certain. "This is his stash. He used to run drops out this way. Heard him bragging about it once. Must have stashed it here and forgot." James stared at the cash, his mind racing. "There's gotta be, what, 50 grand here? More?" "Enough to pay him off," she said, her voice trembling with hope. "And your sharks, too. We could end this, James. Right now." He shook his head, the weight of it sinking in. "Or it could get us killed faster. This ain't ours, Sasha. He finds out we took it. He won't stop till we're in the ground." She grabbed his arm, her grip fierce. "We're already in the ground, man. This is our shot, our only shot. We take it, pay what we owe, and disappear. Start over somewhere he can't touch us." He looked at her, the rain streaking her face, her eyes burning with a desperation he felt in his bones. She was right. They were out of moves, out of time. This bag was a lifeline, dirty as it was, and he wasn't about to let her drown. "All right," he said, nodding slow. "We take it. But we gotta be smart. Split it, ditch the drugs, get out of Michigan tonight." She grinned, fierce and alive, and yanked the bag up, slinging it over her shoulder. "Let's roll, then." They hauled it back to the Impala, the cash a heavy promise between them. James siphoned gas from the pickup with a hose he found in the barn, enough to get them moving, and they hit the road again, the duffel tucked under the back seat. The plan was rough. Head south, cross into Ohio, find a way to launder the money through a friend of Malik's in Cleveland. Pay off Victor, pay off the sharks, then vanish. It was a long shot, but it was theirs. By nightfall, they'd made it to a truck stop outside Toledo, the lot buzzing with semis and tired drivers. James sold his watch, a Rolex his dad had given him, the last piece of his old life, for a couple $100 to a shady pawn guy in the back. With the cash from Sasha's gig and the sale, they rented a cheap house on the edge of town, a 1-story shack with peeling paint and a leaky roof, but it was theirs, at least for now. Sasha set up a corner with a sewing machine she'd scored from a thrift store, her hands already sketching new designs on napkins, her fire flickering back to life. That night, they sat by a small fire pit in the backyard, the flames crackling as the rain held off for once. Sasha peeled off the hoodie, her tank top underneath clinging to her from the day's heat, the bandage on her arm swapped for a fresh one. She leaned back, the firelight dancing on her skin, and James watched her, the ache in his chest shifting from pain to something warmer. "We made it," she said, her voice soft, almost disbelieving. "Didn't think we would." He reached out, brushing his fingers over the scar on her arm, the one from McDonald's that had started it all. "Yeah, we did." He leaned in, kissing the mark, slow and deliberate, and she didn't pull away, just let him, her breath catching. "You're still a mess," she murmured, a smile tugging at her lips. "Only 'cause you stole my heart," he said, and she laughed, bright and real, pulling him close. The cash wouldn't last forever, and Victor might still come sniffing, but for now, they had this, a shack, a fire, each other. They'd lost everything, his empire, her home, but found something better in the ashes. The road ahead was uncertain, but the lesson was clear. Money buys time, but it's the fight and the love that keeps you alive. And that's a wrap, folks. Love this wild ride? Subscribe for more epic stories and comment. What's your takeaway from James and Sasha's journey? Let's chat.